Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for clicking on this link. My name's John. I'm a placement advisor for the Professional Development Centre at Brunel. I'm joined by a colleague and a couple of alumni who we're going to have a chat about their journeys into work, from being students into the workplace, and hopefully along the way draw out some of the issues, concerns, questions that you might also be feeling or thinking or asking about that journey. So without any further ado, we'll introduce ourselves. As I said, I work as a placement advisor, mainly for mechanical and civils and chemical engineers. And Sam?
Hi, yeah, I'm Sam Adam. I'm one of the team of careers consultants. Whatever subject you study, there will be a careers consultant that's allocated to your subject that can help you with any matters, kind of looking for either part-time jobs or internships or going on to graduate jobs when you complete your studies.
Maria.
Okay. I'm Dion.
Okay.
I'm originally from Milton Keynes, but I work in London at a financial services firm in Green Park. I'm a legal PA and also a member of Diversity and Inclusion Committee there. And I've been working there for about 4 years now. And in terms of disabilities, I have an invisible disability called Sickle cell anemia. And it's essentially a blood condition that I was born with, and it can be very unpredictable at any moment. I can have a crisis, which is called excruciating pain, and it can be caused by dehydration or exhaustion. So this is about how I've navigated my journey whilst having this unpredictable condition, which has not been easy, but it's definitely possible.
And I'm Maria Potter. I studied occupational therapy at Brunel back in 2010 to 2013. I have juvenile idiopathic arthritis, which I got when I was 18 months old. So I've had it a long time now. I studied OT and I'm now working as an occupational therapist in London. I needed to move on and sort of get on because of the pandemic, currently working from home, but I'm working in a sort of education role, so therapy practice development facilitator, bit of a mouthful. But yeah, I'm also happy to chat about my journey, sort of slight barriers and things that I had to overcome to get to uni and then whilst I was at uni, but also the sort of support that I had, any hints, tips, advice that I can give to other students and people sort of getting ready to go into the workplace.
Great, thanks so much. So Dion, I was wondering if you could just perhaps tell us a little bit about your journey from Brunel into where you are now, working as a legal PA. How was that for you? If you could just tell us a little bit about how you made the transition from one to the other. Yeah,
sure. So I graduated in 2014, and it feels like a lifetime ago now. It's crazy how time has flown. Yeah, it feels like a long time. How time has flown. And I was blessed enough to actually go straight into work. So I managed to build relationships with people in the television industry. I studied drama, film, and TV. And I tried to do as much work experience as I could whilst I was at Brunel, and managed to nurture those relationships so that when I finished, there was a job straight away waiting for me, which was a blessing in that I could just go straight into it and not get into my head about what am I going to do next? Am I ready for it? Am I prepared? And still be in that student mode. Luckily, it was actually freelance. So I went into it for 3 months, loved it, and then I could have a breather afterwards. And I was like, okay, so I've actually graduated. I'm a graduate, I'm in the working world, like what do I actually want to do? And I managed to continue on there for a couple of years, and it was great, but it was also very taxing on me physically. So as much as I loved the role, as much as I loved doing different shoots and flying to Amsterdam last minute and then having to be in Derby for a week, it was very full on. And I was exhausted. I was really exhausted. It was quite difficult because there's a lot of other people working on these shoots that don't have disabilities, they don't have chronic illnesses, and they don't have any issues. But I was there constantly trying to keep up with all of them when I knew that my body couldn't really handle it. So at that point, I had to just say, okay, this was my dream.
They've been so supportive.
So I spoke to them and I basically said that I can't actually continue because it's really exhausting. And I have a chronic illness that I have to look after. And they said, no, completely, they understand. And so they put me more into an office-based role. but it still had those shoots. So instead of going every week, it would be every other week. And I just had to be realistic in the end and just say, this is obviously what the role is. And I am just not in a position to be able to do that. And essentially, I had to put my health first. And so as much as I loved it, I left. And then I actually went on a career break, sabbatical, whatever you want to call it. And I took time out. And then after that is when I went into just trying to do temp roles, doing reception. And that is how I then found my way to my role now, which was through doing reception work. And I actually really love it now. It's different to what I studied, and it's not what I originally planned, but I just had to adapt because my health came first. And it's really interesting. There's so much that I can get involved in. And so I'm glad that I didn't let that like completely consume me and just sit down and not do anything. And when I go for interviews, I'm really open about my career breaks because it ended up being about 6 months, I think. So I'm very clear in just saying, yes, I was off for 6 months. I was unwell. This is what I had to deal with. But I'm back now and I'm ready to work. And I think sometimes companies can be a bit funny when they see gaps on your CV, like, oh, what were you doing during this time? What were you up to? Because they like to see consistent work. But I just had to be honest. And if they're a company that I would want to work for and that I vibe with, then they would usually understand. And if not, then it's their loss. But yeah, that's a bit of my journey.
Thank you.
So true, isn't it? It's as much about you as it is about the employer, and it's got to be right for you. Thank you so much. And Maria, I guess the same question really. Can you just...
Yeah, sure. Are going to support me, and they're happy to talk. I chose to do occupational therapy at Brunel because I had occupational therapy when I was a kid. I had lots of input from different healthcare professionals, and at one point thought I wanted to be a doctor, at one point I thought I wanted to be a nurse, all these different things. But occupational therapy was the sort of thing that clicked for me because I liked the idea of helping people to adapt and helping people to do the things that they want to do with their lives, because that sort of resonated so much for me, sort of being a young kid growing up with a condition that not a lot of people understood, wanting to do the same things as all of my mates and wanting to do all the same things when I was like a student and wanted to go travelling, wanted to do XYZ different things. So yeah, that's why I got into OT. I did have things that were tricky at Brunel. You know, I had my placements, my practice placements I had to do, and I did find them quite tiring and, you know, they're pretty full on. You're basically working kind of in the NHS or social services, different areas, but then also learning at the same time. And I did sort of wonder at the time, I was like, how am I ever going to survive in the real world actually working as an OT? Like, I'm not doing this properly yet. This is still me learning. But the team at Brunel was so supportive. I had a really good tutor, really lovely tutor, who was so great at just sitting there listening, even if I was having a bit of a cry and I was a bit stressed out. I utilised, you know, the support from the disability dyslexia service. I just used everything that I could, basically. If it's there, I was like, I'm going to make the most of it. And I did love uni, even though there was bits of it that were a bit stressful at times. Like, you know, it all paid off in the end. I qualified, I couldn't believe it. After uni, I was a bit different to Dion, actually. I sort of didn't go straight into like an actual occupational therapist job. I went and lived back home with my mum and dad for a bit, and I sort of thought again, like, what am I going to do? How do I start off? Do I feel ready to go into a job yet? So I actually took a job as a therapy rehabilitation assistant, sort of like a carer role at a brain injury unit, which was, again, similarly to Dion, though, actually quite taxing on me, like physically. Even though I loved it, I loved working with the patients. There's a lot of young people who'd had brain injuries, a lot of older people as well, but, you know, it was quite, you know, interesting, you know, sort of working with people my age or a little bit older and sort of finding out about their lives and trying to help them get back to sort of like day-to-day life after their injuries. There was a lot of manual handling, a lot of adapting on my part. The team were very supportive there. You know, they were great at trying to get shifts that worked for me, so sort of give me the later shifts and sort of holding some of them for me. But over a while I realised, you know, that I needed to move on and sort of get a more 9-to-5 job and actually do the occupational therapy role that I'd actually studied at uni. So I got my first OT job at Guy's and St Thomas's, and I've never left. They've been so supportive. I really, really agree with what you said, Dion, and I think there's that real kind of thing, if they are going to support me and they're happy to talk about how they can support me, then that's the kind of place I want to work. if I mention in like interviews or something, or, you know, in my application that I've got a disability and they seem to be a bit standoffish and they aren't going to really help me, then fine, I'll take myself an application that I've got a disability and they seem to benefit from my skills and things like that. So I was quite open from the start. I think I've always been quite open about my health and my condition, to be honest. So I'm kind of weirdly proud of it. It's part of who I am. It doesn't have to define me, but it's part of me. And yeah, they've just been really good ever since. I've been there for 6 years now, and I've moved up through different posts. I mentioned earlier that during the pandemic, because I'm immunosuppressed, I've had to work from home. And I think I've always been quite open about my health, carved out a role for me so that I could keep working. And I'm so lucky for that. I know that. Now, a lot of people haven't been so lucky with work during the pandemic. But yeah, that's where I am now. Supporting students and junior staff with their development as therapists. And yeah, just looking to the next chapter, I guess, which is weird. And I agree, it feels like a long time ago that I was at Brunel. It's weird now.
So it sounds like you've both found really supportive employers throughout.
Proud of it. It's part of who I am.
How you felt about that when you were still at Brunel? Is it something that you thought about and thought, oh, you know, how's it going to be? Or did you just get on with it?
I think for me, I probably just thought, let me get on with it, because it's something that I was born with. It's something that I've always lived with. I will just go where I'm appreciated and I'll go where I'm supported. There's no part of me that's going to try and change or think, oh, I need to put up this pretense or a facade so that someone will accept me. So I was very open when I went to interviews. I would just say it as it is, very bluntly, and they were probably a bit taken aback. But I'm just so used to talking about it. I talk about it to anyone. And just seeing their reaction, you can just judge so much from it. And there are places that I felt weren't as supportive, even though I got hired, where maybe they were just not happy at the amount of time that I need off sometimes. If I go into hospital, I could be in there for 2 weeks and then I come out and I need another 2 weeks recovery. It's a lot of time. And I understand that for a business, you need people in there. But if I'm not able to do it, I'm not able to do it. And I think it's when you go to a company, like the company I'm at now, I've been off for over a month and they've barely even bat an eyelid. They like send me flowers and they're just like, take all the time that you need, because what can you do about it? They'll get temps in if they need, or they get other people to cover. And when I come back, it's like, welcome back, and then just straight back into the job. And I think when you find companies like that, you then don't worry about the ones that you've missed out or the ones that were not as supportive, because there are going to be some that really appreciate you and the skills that you have to bring. So I guess it was never something that I worried about. And I think when I saw the behaviours that I didn't really like, I was like, okay, noted, let's just move on.
I think you both made a good point there about kind of remembering that the interview is a two-way process. It's not just them interviewing you. It's you can use it to interview them and see what their reactions are, and like use that to judge whether you want their job as much as they want you. That's really good. Yeah. What something you mentioned earlier, Maria, about support at university through. I was wondering, Dion, did you also access any support services at the university regarding your disability?
Yeah, so I did. I think it was called something else when I was there. I'm not quite
Probably,
sure.
Yeah, we've had several name
CC,
changes.
maybe.
Yeah, so I did. So the first thing, when I don't think I actually really applied for anything, but I just remember being contacted by all of these different teams when I actually started at Brunel, which I really appreciated. So there were teams that were contacting me regarding my accommodation, because they wanted to make sure that I had a room that had an alarm, so that if I needed an ambulance or if I needed security to come ASAP, I could just press the button, which I used multiple times. It was really useful. It was just like a direct line when I needed help. So that was also really, really good. They supplied me with equipment, like using like a chair that would enable me to still work even if I was in pain, certain equipment that would just really give me the support that I need rather than something really flimsy. And then I remember just having regular appointments with the disability service, and I had a mentor, and they put me in contact with other people that had sickle cell, and it was like, oh my gosh, there are actually other people that have this condition. You know, you always think it's just you, like you're in your own little bubble and there's no one else. So they kept me well connected as well, and they were always just a phone call away. I found it really, really useful. And then when it came towards graduating, and then got in touch, they just helped me, pushed me towards a placement and career centre. And then there was a lot of work on my CV. I was back and forth. I was probably doing their head in. I was like, is this right now? I was like constant.
No, we like students
We
like
love
you.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Right
was
with us.
constantly back and forth.
Yeah.
And then finally it got into a good position. I was like, okay, I'm glad now. So yeah, I felt very, very supported at university, and it's probably not something that I really even expected, but it definitely exceeded my expectations.
And how about you, Maria? Because you said you went out on placement. Did you kind of use that support in terms of interviews and things like that beforehand, or?
Yeah, because I know ours is a bit different, because I know like a lot of our placements are done sort of internally in occupational therapy. So I didn't necessarily come into contact with your service so much. But yeah, there was a lot of support in sort of like going out and looking at jobs and sort of references, and if you need help with interviews and like making the applications sort of from our department, which was really helpful. I know that some of my friends on the course who had different conditions and disabilities, one of my mates who had dyslexia, she did find the process of doing the applications and things like that really quite stressful, and again the team were really supportive with her, as was the disability and dyslexia service, and she utilised a lot of those teams as well. But yeah, I don't know, like obviously I've not been to uni like loads of places, I've only ever been Brunel, but I found it really supportive there. I think some friends I've had who've gone to other unis who've had a variety of different health conditions haven't always found it as supportive. Not trying to obviously say anything bad about other unis, but I just do think Brunel has always been really good at that. And obviously, you guys doing the podcast today, I think it shows it's continuing even after me and Dion left forever ago.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really good.
What would you say to someone who perhaps was thinking, perhaps someone that feels maybe a little less sure about tackling all of these things? Because you both sound like I'm sure you've faced challenges, but you both sound as if you've dealt with them really, really well and confidently. If someone was thinking, I don't want to face up to all of this, or I don't know where to start, or what would you say to them?
Sorry, Dion, if you want to chime in, please do. I was just going to say, like, I don't get me wrong, I don't think I always felt like this. Like, definitely right at the end of uni, I found the thought of sort of looking at jobs and sort of, I did have some slight like worries, like, well, actually, am I going to manage with my health condition, or what if I do maybe go to someone and apply for a job that I really want actually, and they don't want to support me. I did have some of those thoughts cross my mind. I just do think the best thing is just utilize the support that's there. If you're not knowing where to start, it can seem really overwhelming, thinking, where am I going to even begin with all this? There's you guys, there's support at the uni. You know what you're doing. You guys have done it for so many different students, for different courses, for several. I don't weird, and I agree. It feels like a long time. Johnny said it had been a long time. But you know what I mean? You know what you're doing. You know what the processes are. Like the back of your hand. Obviously, to us, because we're brand new, brand new graduates, we have no idea. So it is stressful, but just utilize that support. Someone will probably put you in the right direction and suddenly make you feel a lot less stressed out about it, because they'll lay out sort of like a bit of a pathway for you. Definitely make the most of it.
I would agree with that, and I would also say that just to take your time as you're navigating things. I think there's always a lot of pressure on students, graduates, to just like jump into like a job just because, okay, I need to be working now, let me just go for what's available, look at the first ad. But I think if you just take a step back and just relax and just think, okay, what would be the best process for me, who could support me in this way, I think it just takes a bit of the pressure off. And I know this society is not made for that. Like, there's always a lot of pressure to just keep going on to the next thing and keep building and getting promoted and all these different things. But I just think if you just take your time, I think it really does help. And I wish that I had done that like a few times earlier on, because like Maria said, like I came across my fair few challenges and I felt like, oh, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, and I felt a bit worried and a bit anxious, and I just had to pause and just regroup and just try and focus on my goals. Where do I want to go? Can I go a different direction in order to still get there? And just really just slow it down. And because we're
your journeys, I wonder,
navigating with an illness, most people don't have that, and so it's not going to go the simple route. And I'm sure we know that by now anyway, having lived with it for how long. So it's just I would say taking a step back and just take your time.
How did you both go about getting support in your first job or in your first placement? You know, that must be quite daunting. It's the first time you have to kind of go to team leader or team manager or whatever and say, look, can we just have a chat about? You know, I imagine a lot of students sitting in, you know, at university, that would be quite a big step to get their head around how to actually go about doing that. So can you tell me a little bit about, you know, that first conversation you might have had with in your first job? What was that like? Or how did you feel? What was it like and how did it end up?
Yeah, sure. I could tell you about mine. So my
Yeah.
first role, I feel like I was like maybe 21, and I hadn't really had that many of these discussions with like a professional company before. Most of the people that I've spoken to about my condition was like family or friends or like at uni. And so I remember I was really, really nervous, and for some reason I didn't even mention it in my interview. So it just completely slipped my mind. They didn't ask me about anything. I got the job, and then I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I need to obviously disclose this because there's going to be certain things that they'll need to adapt. So I remember I called the two managers for a meeting, and they obviously had no idea what it was about. And then I sat down and I told them, and I think they probably felt a little bit blindsided, and they probably felt like I should have raised it before. And I can definitely see their point that they probably would want to have been more prepared with how they can help me, what support that they can get. But then I just thought, I'm not just going to blame myself too much because it's like my first role, I'm young, like these things happen. And also, I don't feel like I should be apologetic for having an illness anyway. I feel like this is, this is my life. This is how I live. And I felt like their response could have been a bit kinder and a bit nicer. And I think we do need a lot of that in companies. From then on, I was very like upfront with it. And I just found that I got a much, much better response. And I think it's just on their side, they don't know what to do. I think it's a bit like panic and a bit like, how can we support you? How can we help? And I think they just need the preparation. So I say, yeah, my first time was not great, and I didn't feel that comfortable. After that, and obviously I'm a pro at these conversations now. I could like sit down, have all my bullet points, and I just reel it all off. And so it also takes experience on our side as well. So yeah, I'm much better at it now. So yeah, I'd say it wasn't great initially, but definitely developed over time.
Yeah. Maria, how was it, you know, like your first job, your first role going into that conversation?
I'm trying to remember it, which is really bad. No, I think I did mention it at my interview. I think it was quite an informal interview, which I was really lucky about. So it was kind of, you know, a bit of a sit down one, but then it was kind of let's take you around the centre that I was gonna hopefully be working at. And I think it kind of came up in conversation as we were talking about sort of the fact that I'd studied OT at uni and, you know, like what had got me into it and that kind of thing. And I kind of mentioned it, and thankfully, I mean, I was lucky. I'm aware, obviously, not all employers are always like that, but they were really quite like, oh, okay, cool. That probably means you've got quite a lot of empathy with the patients, to be honest. You know, you can kind of, you know, see where they're coming from, and, you know, you've had barriers to overcome yourself. I don't get me wrong, I was still worried about mentioning it. I was slightly at the back of my head thinking, are they going to turn around and go, right, well, you're not going to be able to do the job like, you know, how you need to. But again, I guess it kind of links in with the whole kind of, if I want to work there and be happy there, I guess they're going to have to come and meet me in the middle somewhere. Yeah, most recent job, I don't actually know if I did mention it in the interview. Again, I'm trying to remember now. I know I definitely obviously had to have a conversation and sort of, you know, fill in stuff with like HR and then occupational health. And I think I was quite worried about going into occupational health, that they then might be, you know, like, oh, you know, actually, can you do this job? You know, we're going to have to stop you from seeing certain patients because you're immunosuppressed. We're going to have to stop you from doing all these different things. But I actually think a lot of places that have occupational health tend to be quite good in the sense of they want to help you do the job. They're not there to tell you can't do this job. They'll bend over backwards to figure out a way that you can do it, whether it's equipment, adjustments, you know, and then they really advocate for you to then try and make sure that those things get put in place. Yeah, and I've had to recontact them and speak to them at different times since, as my conditions fluctuated, and, you know, maybe I've had a bit of a flare up over the winter when my arthritis tends to be worse, and they've always been really good. I think every time I've always slightly worried that that's going to be the time where they turn around and go, right, you're out. But thankfully, no, they've always gone, right, okay, here's some ideas, let's give them all a try. So yeah.
Do you find, Dion, it sounded like you were doing more of an educational role as well. You were actually kind of, you know, had to tell them what the condition was and how it affected you.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly, because most people that I speak to, it's getting better nowadays, but usually no one has ever heard of sickle cell before. And they're always just like, oh, okay, what's that? So I think at every company I've been at, no, they've not known what it is when I sit down with HR. And so I'm teaching them, this is what it is, this is how it affects me, this is what I require. And I think I've become much more bold in saying what I actually need from them, because then it makes them able to decide whether that's something they can provide or not. So I'm very clear in saying I will need time off sometimes. I have appointments, not like normal people that are 20 minutes. My appointments can last the whole day because I have to have blood tests and stuff. So that's another day out. So I'm very clear in saying this is what I actually require, and then it's up to them to see if they can support me in that way. So yeah, I've done a lot of educating, but I guess I don't mind. It's all a part of the awareness, isn't it?
Yeah. But it sounds also that it's not just educating them on your condition, it's also educating them on how to treat people with a disability and some of the processes. It sounds like you've also been kind of instrumental in helping them to get better.
Yeah, which is what they need as well. And I remember a short while ago I did a campaign for the NHS, and it was called Dear Sickle Cell, and it's about trying to get more people to give blood, because we need it. We're always having transfusions. And I remember I sent it to my HR team, and I said, I'm sending this to you not only because I work for you guys and I have sickle cell, but what if you come across anyone else, like any colleagues, anyone else that joins the company, or anyone else that you meet that you don't know, this is very instrumental in showing you. And I broke it down in the video about how it we need, and they were really grateful, and they said thank you, because where else are they going to get that information? They can do their own research, but it's so much better hearing it as a personal experience from someone. So I try my best to do that, because I think it can help others as well.
I think that's something that, you know, students can take into a company when you're asked about, you know, in the interview, typical interview question, what can you bring to our company? You know, that may be a really neat way of disclosing, sharing, open, you know, being open, is saying, well, actually what I can bring is an awareness of what's going on for me into your company, so that you can also just while it's popped into my head is a lot of you know, national website, like National Autistic Society, will have information sheets, guidance for people about how to go about talking to employers on there. So I just thought I'd throw this into this conversation.
Absolutely, and that's something that we can help you with as well. Your placement advisor or your careers consultant can help you kind of sit down and think, right, how am I going to say this? What am I going to say? Who am I going to say it to? Because there's lots of different elements to it, aren't there, to think about.
I know it might sound a bit weird, but I also sometimes think, like, a lot of us having health conditions and disabilities that we've kind of had to kind of adapt to and overcome, it kind of demonstrates we've got a skill set that companies want to have, to be honest. Like, and I think I'm not saying, obviously, I know everyone experiences things totally differently, but I do think sometimes they might be quite like you said, actually, Dion, that they're quite like, whoa, cool, okay, fine. When you come out and say, this is what my life's like, you know, they're quite like, oh, okay. Bit of an element of, you know, sort of confidence and self-awareness that, you know, it's good to have. And I think, I don't know, I'd like to think at the moment, like, things to do with mental health and invisible illnesses, what we've both got, a lot of companies and just the general public are starting to develop a much better awareness of those kind of things. So I think people are hopefully, touch wood, less sort of scared now. It's a bit like, oh, okay, that's what you've got going on. I think a lot of people have a lot of health conditions and disabilities going on that we're all starting to get a bit more confident at talking about now. Anyway, sorry if that was a little bit of a tangent.
No, definitely. I think it also shows a sense of resilience as well. I think anyone that has an illness that they live with or has a disability and is still willing to work and still wants to better themselves, like, that really does take resilience. And I think we should all, like, be super proud of ourselves for just even pushing and still going for it, because we could just be like, no, and tapping out and not even trying. But the constant trying, I think you get better at it as well, and it does make you a stronger person for sure. And it's a great skill. So yeah, employers should really want that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think any professional organisation would be, you know, very willing to take that on board. Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, totally agree. You know, there's all manner of strengths that can be built up by managing a journey that's different to the average journey, and that's definitely something to shout out loud about in interviews. I was just going to ask, Maria, you've kind of mentioned how COVID has affected your work. Has it affected your work at all, Dion? Well, I'm
Yes.
sure it has, but in what?
Yes. Yeah, I'm just trying to think because I feel like COVID started forever ago.
Yeah.
It's going on a long time. Yeah, so as soon as COVID started to come and we were aware and it was on the news and everything, the HR team, they actually approached me and they said, okay, so we guessing that you're vulnerable. And I said yes. And they said, okay, so we want you to start working from home. And this was before anyone else in the company was really doing that. So I really appreciate that. And I said, yeah, okay, sure, absolutely. But then they actually took the decision to just close the London office a few weeks later, and then everyone started working from home. And it has been that way still up until now. We're all working from home. So it's been well over a year. And I think it's been great for me in terms of I feel much more rested. I'm not, because I was commuting to work, like the traveling back and forth. It is a lot. Even though it's like when I get there, I sit down, it still is a lot. So I'm much more rested. And I'm in a much more peaceful environment. Like I like being out of London. It's a good balance. When I go in there, it's city life and it's very chaotic and lots going on. And then I come out and it's very peaceful. So it's been a good balance in that way. I think maybe it's been harder in terms of I feel like I'm not as active. And I feel like over the years, I've brought my strength and resilience up to a point where I feel like I can do a lot. I can go into work every day. I can go and do dance classes. I know where my limit is. I can push myself and do a lot without getting sick. And I feel like as soon as COVID came, it just all came to a halt. And now I sit at home and I'm on my laptop and then I'll manage to maybe get one walk in. So I feel like it's affected me physically in that way and that I'm not as strong. So I'm keen to get back into the routine and build up my strength. And then the last way I would say that my mental health probably took a hit as well. I think usually when I'm working, there's a lot going on, and then when I get sick, it's like, oh, okay, I'm sick, but I'm on a break, and then I go back to work, and I feel like the times that I've been sick during COVID, I feel like it's just made it even worse. You feel like very isolated. There's not much going on. You don't have anything excited to get back to, like going to work and doing something I enjoy. It's not been great in that way, and just it's a lot quieter. It's a quieter life being at home. My mum was still able to go to work, my sisters, so it's just a lot quieter, and I feel like I missed that social aspect, and I didn't realize how much that social aspect actually contributed to my health as well, especially my mental health. I feel like I didn't really notice it before because probably took it for granted, and then when it was taken away, it was a bit like, okay, this is harder. So those are a few ways that it's affected me. So I'm much looking forward to going back, and I know that when I do go back, it won't be 5 days a week. I think it will be 2 or 3, which I'm happy with because I still have the balance, which is, yeah, it's enough for me.
Yeah. And it's taken away some of that informal support as well, maybe you were getting in the workplace. I don't know if either of you got comments on how, that the way informal support happens in the workplace, or the way the virtual COVID and virtual work life has affected that.
Yeah, I do think you're right though, actually, John. I mean, I think again, I've been lucky as in a lot of the colleagues that I work with have always been really supportive. So if I'm having a bit of a flare up one day at work and I'm not feeling my best, but I'm sort of well enough to be there, then they'll sort of take that into consideration and help me out where they can, if it's kind of doing a bit more of the physical stuff, or even just getting me a cup of tea or a coffee or something like that, it's quite nice. So yeah, I've also really missed that. And I agree with Dion. I think even though it's been great being able to work from home, and I think a lot of businesses, including the NHS, have suddenly realised actually a lot of people can do a lot more from home now. We didn't necessarily explore the option before, and we've obviously had to with COVID. So I do think now is that trying to get that balance right about, actually when we're having our bad days, we could be at home resting, sort of like, taking our health into account and putting that at the, the forefront and making that the priority. But it is still good to be in the workplace around other people, getting that social contact, and being in that routine, because I agree, even though it's been good that I've got the most sleep I've probably ever had in my life, I just think my stamina overall has probably dropped quite a lot because I'm just not used to getting up in the morning, getting on the train, getting up to work, spending a whole day in the office, and then coming home and then having my downtime. So it's been an interesting one, definitely.
Definitely advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, for sure.
I think virtual interviewing and virtual recruitment is here to stay. I think a lot of companies will continue doing that. And one of the comments we got on the workshop, Sam, if you remember, was from a student with physical disabilities. He said actually not having to go to an interview was quite a big bonus now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know why companies weren't doing it before. It seems like a no-brainer to just do virtual interviews. It's crazy that it's only just happened. When I think about it, I'm like, of course, especially availability with the candidates having to like leave wherever they are if they're at work trying to get out. I was just, I have no idea why we didn't do this before.
Any form of meeting, to be honest, the efficiency is through the roof. Like,
crazy.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And Maria, I think you've had some experience of recruiting yourself now, haven't you?
Yeah, a bit. I did do, actually this was pre-COVID actually, so I did do a bit of sort of recruiting for an assistant role that we had, and actually the lady that we recruited did have some physical and some mental health conditions, so that was an interesting process to sort of be involved with, and actually again it was quite interesting that she did mention some of her own experiences within the interview process, and sort of, you know, that kind of helped her outline why she thought she'd be really good for the role. So it's interesting to see it from the other side of the table, if you know what I mean, because this was pre-COVID, so of course it wasn't virtual, it was face-to-face. But yeah, I think more from what I'm doing now has been a lot more to do with sort of supporting the education of sort of students. So again, I've kind of, you know, seen it from the other side myself now, and sort of apprentices that we have working in the trust who are obviously doing their studies alongside their work. And it is interesting speaking to them about their health conditions. Earlier on in the year, when quite a lot of our student placements at work were sort of either on hold or there was still quite a lot of students shielding. I had a couple of students that I looked after and did their placement. Sorry, I was their educator, not looked after. I was their educator for, and they were both still at home shielding. And otherwise, if we hadn't been able to do like a virtual placement, how we're sort of obviously talking now, they wouldn't have been able to do their placements. And one of them qualified and has now got her first job and is working, which is amazing. And the other student is literally on the cusp of graduating. So, you know, I think it's interesting that COVID's kind of forced us to figure out how we need to adapt. And actually that it was a lot easier to adapt in some places than I think probably people first thought. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't say having a placement in the NHS completely virtually was completely easy, and it did take a bit of planning and organising. But, you know, the students were really enthusiastic. They wanted to get as much learning out of it as they could. They also wanted to be able to contribute to the service as well, which was amazing. And yeah, and we got there in the end. We worked around the health conditions that they both had. I think doing the job that I do helps in the sense of part of my job is helping people to adapt to their health conditions. But don't get me wrong, you know, they still came with their own anxieties and their worries about, you know, how long it took them to write notes, for instance, or, you know, sort of getting a bit fatigued during the day and needing to take regular breaks. But I think you just got to be honest sometimes and just say, actually, this is what I need. And you figure out where we can make those adjustments and where we maybe need to explore different ideas.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Dion, have you had experiences of like supporting other members of staff or recruiting or?
I think not recently. I would say a couple of years ago I was involved in it, and I tried to, because I know what it's like being on the other side, I tried to put myself in their shoes and I tried to make them feel as comfortable as possible, to the point where there were some that just revealed a few of their worries and a few of their anxieties. And I think that's probably the best situation that you actually want. You want them to feel comfortable to say, okay, this is what I'm actually worried about going into the workplace. This is what I'm worried about going into employment. And I think, like, when I think back to when I was younger, I just know that when I first started, I didn't do that. And I had all these anxieties and all these worries inside of, am I actually going to be able to do this job? Are they going to be able to support me? And I didn't voice it. So I would say that if I could go back, I would say to definitely just voice it. I think it takes a willingness on their side to be actually able to want to help you, and I think you'll be able to tell from the type of employer if they are willing to help or if they're not, and I think that will be the best match in that way. So I just tried to make them feel as comfortable as possible and let them know that it's okay, and most of these situations can actually be worked around. It just takes a willingness from the employer.
And I think that has become more of a focus for employers these days. So hopefully things are shifting. I've seen a shift in attitudes and employers and how they approach an interview, and then wanting to make it a positive experience for candidates. So hopefully, you know, you guys have had to go through the times of breaking through barriers, but there should be more willingness on the behalf of employers. And it is always useful to, I don't know, have you ever kind of looked up when you're looking for a job in terms of, is the employer signed up to the disability confidence scheme, or is that something that you take into account, or not really?
I haven't before, actually.
No,
I can't say I have either, which makes me feel a bit silly. I'd hope the NHS would be, but I don't know for definite.
I'm sure.
I mean, I think I've definitely looked up sort of, you know, if there are any sort of, if there's any info and advice about staff support and stuff like that. I definitely think that's something worth looking at, and if you can, finding about the experiences of people who already work there and that kind of thing, I think it's always healthy, because, you know, then you sometimes find out that other people who've said, oh, you know, I've had really good support because of health conditions or a disability. It's always good to see.
Yeah, you'll find companies will put information on their website sometimes. Yeah, and that might be another filter you use to determine whether that's the company for you or not. I think, you know, being fair to the smaller company, it might be, you know, that the bigger companies can put more HR resource into building a website, you know, that's all singing, all dancing. With a smaller company, you know, if it's just 2 people and a dog and you know, you might have to put more effort in, you know, that educational role that you were going on about, Dion. And
to be honest, because I've been at smaller companies. In my company now is not a massive company, and I think it actually worked as a benefit, because they're a smaller team. They could personalize the care towards me, so whatever I needed they could just implement, because they didn't have massive systems in place. They didn't have lots of people they had to go to for approval. It was just, what do you need, and let's work it out. So it was like a working relationship in that way. So it has its benefits as well, but of course, like bigger companies that have systems in place, that's also great.
That's a good point. I hadn't, that hadn't occurred to me, that actually the smaller company is quicker to adapt sometimes. You know, although it doesn't have processes, but once they know, you know, you might find a quicker response. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
I had a question for you, John and Sam. Anyway, how are the students feeling about graduating into like a COVID/post-COVID world? How are they approaching it?
It's certainly a challenge, isn't it? I mean, I think vacancies are down, and
I mean, I would say obviously everyone is an individual, so there's a whole range of emotions, really. But encouragingly, compared to this time last year, actually vacancies are up and they're increasing all the time. It does depend on the sector, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of reason to be positive, and sometimes it's good just to be able to express that to students, because you know, there is a lot of worry out there and fear. That's always the case when it comes to graduation to a certain extent. So that's exacerbated in these times, but I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. So you know, I guess it's our job to pass that message on and just to be able to help people. But of course there's anxiety, and there are more challenges than in an average year, but things are definitely opening up, improving. You know, sports is one of the cohorts I work with, and this time 6 months ago there was, you know, there were very little opportunities around. Now suddenly there's things all over the place, so it is way more positive, which is nice.
No,
sorry.
No, I was just about to say, I you know, my reference to a few vacancies was perhaps a year ago, you know, when engineering took a massive hit from the first impact of COVID, particularly civil engineering. And now, as I say, employers are getting, like you both pointed out, employers are getting more used to different ways of working and considering, you know, more blended working as well, which again, if you have, you know, whatever the disability is, but particularly if it's around mobility, you know, it actually opens a few doors. And there's a lot more recruitment activity now than there was perhaps last summer. Definitely.
Sorry, John.
No, that was it. So
okay, I was just going to go back to something you were just mentioning, Dion. You sort of alluded to some advice you would give yourself if you could go back. So I guess that's a question I throw back to both of you. If there was anything that you could advise yourself as a someone about to graduate, what do you think would be important to know now?
I would definitely say to just be unapologetic about who you are and your journey. I think although I was quite sure of myself back then, but not enough in like a work environment, because I hadn't really experienced it. So I just graduated and it was like, okay, let's throw myself into full-time work. I didn't really know how to navigate that whilst being 100% myself and just saying, this is what I offer and this is what I need from you. And I think that's something that I had to learn over time. So you just have to be bold with it, because you know what you bring, you know what your skills are, you've just graduated, you have a degree, you can bring a lot to the table. And it's just up to them to be able to say, okay, yes, we can support you, or no, we can't. And if they can't, don't take it personally, just move on to the next one that can, because there will always be another employer that can give you what you need. So that would be my advice to my younger self: be bold.
And Maria?
No, I'd really agree I really agree with what Dion's saying, and I think sort of like following on for something you said earlier, actually, Dion, where you said, like, you know, just chill out, don't panic, stay calm. I think, like, when I left uni, I had that kind of panic moment where, like I said, I was like, do I even feel confident to do the job that I've studied for the last 3 years? And I went into another role which was similar and linked, but not what I'd qualified for. And at the time, like, a lot of my mates were like, why are you doing that? But you know what? I'm actually so happy with the journey that I've had to get here now. I'm still young. I've got my whole career ahead of me, my whole life ahead of me. Even if you start off somewhere and it just doesn't feel like the glove fits, it's not quite the right job for you, it's not the end of the world. I guess almost following on from what you guys were saying about COVID, and obviously, you know, there's sort of maybe not been as many opportunities. I do think, thankfully, I think obviously if things are improving, companies are evaluating and, you know, finding, you know, new opportunities and putting more jobs out there, which is good. But yeah, something will come up. Even if you do something that's still building on your experience and building on your skills, that's grand. Just, you know what I mean? Like, it's a journey at the end of the day. If you walk out of uni and go into your ideal job straight away, then fair play. But I don't think that's as interesting. That ain't really the journey, is it? That's not how it works in real life. But, you know, the journey to get to your ideal job is more fun at the end of the day. So yeah, just don't panic, and yeah, disclose stuff. I know everyone's different. Not everyone always necessarily feels the most confident about doing it, but I think largely people want to help you. They want to be able to help you do the job and, you know, get the most out of it. So I would just be as open and honest as you can.
I think that's from both of you really lovely advice, so thank you. And just go back to what you said, Maria. I wrote it down so I didn't forget. You said you just have to be bold with it, and I would say, you know,
I can't claim the bold comment.
Sorry, yes. I would just say, if you're not feeling bold with it, just come and see us, and we'll help you kind of put together that bold statement, or how to get yourself into that bold state of mind. You don't have to struggle with it by yourself. We're here.
Absolutely.
It's definitely trial and error as well. There were times when I was not like that, and then I would try it the next time, and I would just get better and better each time. It's definitely trial and error, and you will get there in the end.
Yeah. So it may take 1 or 2 interviews to get to
took a lot for
point
me.
of being bold and open and just going for it. But yeah, as I say, you know, the Professional Development Centre at Brunel is here to help you, and the Wellbeing Team, as they're now called. So that was your reference to the Disability and Dyslexia team, and now the Wellbeing Team. But well, thank you very, very much for being part of this. That's absolutely brilliant.
Thanks
for
really lovely to talk to you both.
Oh, thank you. No, it was really great.
So what I'll do.
Like a student again.
Sorry, what was that?
Nice to try and feel like a student again.
Excellent. Right. Well, thank you very much. Sam, have you got any kind of closing words, or?
No, just thank you so much. You know, I think you've given some really, really lovely advice and really fantastic words of wisdom for current students to take on board. And you know, good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Take care. And whoever's watching this, good luck with your journey too. And I hope it turns out successful, and do come and seek some help from the Professional Development Centre if you feel that need. We'd like to see you anyway, but yeah, come to us. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.